This is an audio recording of Bob the Photographer by Arthur M. Winfield, narrated by Right Here Audio. Chapter 11. Bob assists a stranger. Bob was surprised at the stranger's words. He shook off the hold the man had on his throat and grasped him by both arms. "What did you say?" he demanded. "I said I wanted my money back," growled the stranger wildly. "You drugged me, and I know it, Jim Casco." Again the man stared at Bob, and then to both sides. "I must be off," he hiccoughed. "I thought I was still in Cabot's place." "Is Cabot's a saloon?" "It's a saloon and a thieves' den," growled the man. "Gosh, how my head spins." "And you think you were drugged?" "Of course I was. Ordinary liquor wouldn't knock me out like this." "You said something about a Jim Casco." "That's the man." "Heard the barkeeper call him by the name. But he got hushed up pretty quick." "Where did you meet this Casco?" The drugged man gave a deep sigh. He was gradually coming to his right senses. Bob got some water and bathed his head, after which the victim felt better. "Let me think. Oh, yes. I met this Casco down by the river. There was an Irishman with him." "What was his name?" "This Casco called him Mike." "But say, who are you?" "I know those rascals, and I'm willing to be your friend," returned Bob. "Good for you. And your handle?" "Bob Alden." "Mine is Walter Anderson. I came to Stampton from Buffalo a month ago, and I've been making pretty much a fool of myself ever since, but I wish I had my money back." "How much did you have with you?" "About $30. "And it's gone?" "Every cent of it. Hang the luck." Bob thought for a moment. "Would you mind showing me the way to Cabot's place?" "Certainly not. Come on. I'm feeling better than I did a while ago." Walter Anderson led the way down the street and into a dirty square fronting the river. "See that fancy light over on the corner?" "Yes." "That's it. Cabot calls it the Riverman's Rest. It is nothing but a thieves' den. Now listen to me," said Bob earnestly. "If I go in, will you stay here till I come out?" "Yes, but—" "I will see if this Casco and Mike are inside. If they are, I will let you know and you can summon assistance and we can have them arrested." "Good enough." Anderson took a seat on a stepping stone near the curb, pulling his hat far down over his eyes and turning up his collar in true tough style. Bob made his way towards the Riverman's Rest. Nothing could be seen from the outside but the lights, as the screens were tightly drawn over windows and doors. Bob hesitated only a moment, then he opened one of the doors and entered. A cloud of thick and rank tobacco smoke greeted him, mingled with the smell of stale liquors. "Phew! Enough to make a decent man sick," was the youth's mental comment. "How anybody can love to come to such a place is past my comprehension." The place was a long and narrow one. In the rear was a sort of restaurant, and seeing a vacant table, Bob walked over to it and dropped into a seat. "A sandwich and a cup of coffee," he said to the dirty waiter who came to take his order. While the waiter was filling the order, Bob gazed around him, and his keen eyes took in every detail of the place. Not far behind him was a door leading to a side room. This door stood partly ajar, and by pushing his chair back a little distance from the table, Bob was enabled to see into this apartment. At a table in the middle of the small room were seated an old man and a middle-aged woman. The old man, it was plain to see, was little better than a sot. His clothes were worn out and dirty, and his general appearance showed that he had long since lost all pride. The woman was quite ladylike in appearance, and well-dressed. She seemed to be expostulating with the old man. "Why don't you leave them, father, and turn over a new leaf?" Bob heard her say. "That's all right enough to say," growled the old man in return. "I can't leave 'em." "Yes, you can." "If I did, how would I get along?" "I will help you." "Bosh! Your help wouldn't amount to enough. It costs money to live." "It costs money to drink," she cried. "Otherwise—" Bob did not catch any more of the conversation. Presently, just as the waiter came with the youth's order, the lady arose and left by a side door. "She looked out of place here," thought Bob. "If that is her father, I pity her." In vain, Bob scanned the faces of those already in the place and those who came in. Nothing was to be seen of Casco and Grogan. "They must have left before I got here," thought Bob. "I wonder if I can find out where they went." He ate his sandwich slowly, but even when he had finished, he was still in doubt as to how to proceed. But just as he was about to arise, someone came through a hallway in the back and entered the little side room. "Well, Blake, did you think I wouldn't get back?" asked the newcomer of the old man. "You've been a long time," mumbled the old man. "I couldn't help it." "Where's the girl?" "Gone." "Good. I don't want to run against her any more." "Sarah ain't like she used to be," was the reply. Bob listened with great interest to this talk. The old man's name was Blake, and the woman was spoke of as Sarah. Could she be the Sarah Blake Barker had mentioned? "If she is, I must meet her, and talk to her by all means," said Bob to himself. "She must know something about the past." Bob wondered who the newcomer was, but he was not kept in doubt long. The voice sounded slightly familiar from the start, and presently the speaker spoke up loud, and the youth made the astonishing discovery that the man was James Casco in disguise. The scar-faced man wore a heavy beard and mustache, and was dressed in the garb of a waterman. "I have located him at last," thought Bob, "now to see that he does not escape." Casco and the old man entered into a low conversation of which Bob heard but little, although he tried his best to make out what was being said. Presently the two arose and slipped out of a door into the back hall. "They're going upstairs," was Bob's conclusion. "I wonder if I dare follow them." Arising, he walked to the desk and settled for what he had. Then he pretended to be interested in a number of pictures hanging on the walls. Gradually he drifted back towards the side room, and watching his chance to see that he was not observed, he slipped into the apartment and swiftly but silently made his way to the hall. Here only a smoky lamp hanging from the ceiling lit up the place, leaving all in semi-darkness. No one appeared to be in the hall, and listening intently, so as not to be caught napping, Bob ascended the stairs. "I suppose if they found me here, and knew what I was after, it would go hard with me," he thought. "Well, I am in this game to win, and I'll prove to them yet that I am not a nobody." Arriving at the upper hall, Bob paused and peered around. All was dark, save for a thin ray of light that shone from under the door to one of the middle rooms. Approaching this door, Bob listened for several minutes. At first he could hear nothing, but gradually there came to his ears the voice of 4 men in earnest conversation. The 4 men appeared to be in a room beyond the one opening upon the hall. Should Bob enter the first room? "I'll go the length of the string," he said bravely. "It is the only way to capture them. I wonder if that Walter Anderson is still on guard?" He tried the door, and finding it unlocked, pushed it open. The room appeared to be a sort of lodge room, with half a dozen benches scattered around, and a desk and chair at one end. A lamp stood on the desk, which was piled high with papers. Opposite the desk was the door leading to the room in which were the 4 men. This door stood on a crack, and tiptoeing his way forward, Bob peered in and beheld Casco and Blake on one side of a table, with Barker and Mike Grogan on the other. "All of them," he muttered to himself. "What a haul it would make if the police were only here at this moment." He was about to leave and summon help, when he heard Barker mention his name. "Yes, I had a hard time of it getting away," went on the man. "I tell you, that boy is smart." "He comes from a smart family," put in old Blake. "His father—" "Hush!" cried Barker hastily. "None of that here." "Well, just as you say, Bill," returned the old man. "But I reckon you will have a job with Sarah." Barker put up his hand, and the old man broke off at once. "Well, how about that money?" demanded Grogan. "Sure, and we have waited long enough for it." "So we have." "And we'll have to wait a while longer." "What for?" "That Jew has got into trouble." "How?" "Over some stolen goods a jeweler's clerk sold him. We have got to take the stuff to somebody else." "Sure, and 'tis a shame," growled Grogan. "We've had more trouble about that swing than any I ever seen before." "That's true," said Casco, "but the whole thing will be settled by next week, and then we'll be off for the big haul." "And I'm to be in that?" put in old Blake eagerly. "You are," said Barker. Suddenly Casco jumped to his feet. "I forgot to ask Cabot about something," he cried. "Just wait till I come back." He made for the door. Bob tried to retreat, but he was too late. Out in the hall, Casco overtook him and caught him by the shoulder. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Let me go!" cried Bob. He tried to break away, but the scar-faced man held him fast. "Hello? Is that Bob Alden? How did you get in here?" "Walked in." "Let me go!" "Oh, I'll let you go," returned Casco sarcastically. "Hi there, boys. Here's a spy." "Sure, and who is it?" Barker ran out and aided Casco in dragging Bob into the lodge room. Then, before they released him, the door was closed and locked. Chapter 12. Bob's Queer Experience. "Now I imagine we have you safe," said Casco after the door was locked. "Sit down on that bench." "Well, if you insist, I will," returned the youth, trying to make the best of the situation. He was terribly chagrined at the turn affairs had taken, but he resolved to brave it out as best he could. "Now tell us how you came to follow us here," said Barker. "I discovered Casco was stopping here." How did you discover that? He robbed a friend of mine. Huff. He must mean the jay who was drugged, muttered Casco. I didn't know he was a friend of yours. While Casco was talking, Barker opened a closet and brought forth a rope. With this, Bob was bound, hands and feet. Now if you make the least outcry, we will gag you, he said. What do you intend to do with me this time? Questioned the youth. One thing is certain, you won't escape us, returned Barker with an evil smile. Better see if he has any money with him, suggested Grogan. Bob was at once searched and the $3 in his pocket taken from him. Every little counts, said the Irishman. Blake, suppose you go down and get a bottle for all hands. Old Blake at once left the lodge room. In less than 2 minutes he returned, all out of breath. Get the boy out of sight, he cried. What's up? Asked the others in concert. Cabot says the police are watching the place. He just saw an officer walk past with that fellow who was drugged. The old Nick, you say? Muttered Casco. I thought he had been fixed for all night. Catch hold, Barker. Where to? The garret. Quick. Barker caught hold of Bob on one side and Casco on the other, and between them they carried the youth up 2 flights of narrow stairs and into a sloping room under the roof. Grogan followed with a lamp which was placed on the floor. Let me see, said Casco, looking around. And here is a crossbeam, let us lash him to that. This was quickly done in such a manner that Bob could move but little. We must make it impossible for him to escape, said Barker. In spite of his stout heart, Bob was compelled to shiver at being tied up. We had better gag him, went on Barker. Of course. Here's a bit of rag. Will do for that purpose. A strip of an old dress was brought forth, and after tying a large knot in the middle, the strip was placed over Bob's mouth, with the knot inside and made fast. That settles him for the present, said the scar-faced man. Now we had better put out the light. Yes, dousely Glim be all mains, said Grogan. Then I'll look out the front winder and see if them men is still hanging around. The light was extinguished, and the Irishman opened the small window in the front end of the garret. The fresh air that came in was very welcome to Bob, who could hardly breathe. Oi, can't see anybody, said Grogan after a long look down into the streets. Perhaps Cabot was mistaken. I'll go down and see, replied Barker. If anybody comes up here and tries to nose around, bluff him off. We will, said Casco, but keep watch and give us plenty of warning. This was agreed to, and Barker left the garret immediately. The others grew silent, Casco standing by the stairs with ears on the alert. 5 minutes passed. They dragged slowly to Bob, who was wondering what would happen next, and if he would ever get out of his predicament with a whole skin. Suddenly, 2 pistol shots rang out. They were followed by a whistle outside and another on the second floor below. The raid by the police had begun. It was dark in the garret. Bob could not make out the movements of his captors. He heard Casco say something to Grogan, and then the 2 went off, leaving old Blake in sole charge. The latter remained near the stairs, listening intently for the first sign of anyone trying to come up. Presently there was another cry, and then Blake hurried to Bob's side. Listen to me, he said. Don't you dare to make a move or a sound till I come back. If you do, I'll fix you. Then Bob heard him descend the stairs, and heard the opening and closing of the door. Bob at once set to work freeing himself. He did not care for the threat which had been made. Probably Blake had become frightened and would not return at all. Close to where Bob was bound was a large blue chest with iron-bound corners. When he had been brought to the spot, the youth had noticed that one of the iron corners was broken, leaving a sharp edge sticking from the top. Bob could just reach the chest with his feet, and by rubbing the rope around his ankles over the rough edge of the iron, he managed after considerable trouble to wear the rope in 2, thus freeing his feet. But his hands were still tied behind him, and to a small bit of joist between 2 upright beams. Planting his feet firmly on the floor, Bob tugged at the joint with all his strength, and he was at last overjoyed to find he had loosened one end. To loosen the other was a comparatively easy job, and then Bob stood a free boy, but with his hands still fastened to the bit of wood. Bending over the chest, he again began his rubbing process, and soon the wood fell to the floor, and Bob's hands were once again ready for use. He lost no time in tearing the dirty gag from his mouth. While he was doing this, he heard the door at the foot of the stairs unlocked, and Grogan came up. Bob knew the Irishman tread too well to be mistaken. He turned to flee, then not knowing where to go, he stopped short and faced his enemy. Grogan carried a lantern on one arm. He cast the rays over to where Bob had been tied and uttered an exclamation of dismay. Then he caught sight of Bob. At the same time, the youth snatched up the piece of joist. "Make a sound, Grogan, and I will strike!" cried Bob determinedly. "How did you get loose?" demanded the Irishman. "That is my affair. Stand where you are." Instead of complying, Grogan made a dash forward. As he did so, Bob struck out at him. The joist struck the lantern, shivering it to pieces and leaving the pair in darkness. Bob struck out again, and this time Grogan was knocked over. Finding his enemy did not offer to move, Bob spoke to him. Grogan made no reply. Growing alarmed, Bob struck a match and lit the wick of the lantern, which lay close at hand. "Knocked out that trip," muttered Bob to himself. "Well, it serves him right. I reckon I'd better go below." He was about to carry out his idea when he heard the door at the foot of the stairs open. "Hurry up, Barker," he heard in the voice of Casco, and then the steps came closer. What was to be done? It would be foolhardy to face the two men, both of whom he felt sure were armed. He must escape by some other means. The window in the front end of the garret was still open, and towards this Bob rushed and looked out. The sidewalk was fully 40 feet below, and there was no way to reach it save by a jump, and this would have meant instant death. Bob looked up. Overhead, the roof of the building was but a few feet away. He sprang upon the window-sill and without hesitation pulled himself out and upon the sloping roof beyond. It was a dangerous situation, but Bob's nerves were up to a high tension and he did not falter. The electric lights on the street beyond threw considerable light on the roof, and by this means the youth was enabled to crawl down to the gutter. Then he walked along to the rear, and finding here a projection 1 story lower, dropped upon it. All had become quiet in the saloon and restaurant below, and Bob wondered what the police had done and if they had really gone. The youth looked around for some means of reaching the ground. There was the water spout, but that seemed too frail to bear his weight. Leaning over the edge of the roof, he saw not far below a pulley line used for drying clothes. The other end of the line was fastened to a house on the opposite side of the yard, and by pulling upon the line, Bob found it moved through the pulley easily. Taking his pocket-knife, the youth quickly severed one of the lines and hauled it on the other. The consequence was that he soon found himself in possession of about 100 feet of good strong wash line. Twisting the line double, Bob fastened one end to a chimney, and grasping the other, he started to lower himself down over the edge of the roof. Bob came down the last 10 feet with a great rush, thereby tearing some of the skin from his hands, but he shut his teeth hard, and though the pain was great, he made no sound. Darting across the yard, he entered the back door of the house on the next street. The door led to a dark and narrow hallway. Once inside, Bob closed the door and, finding a bolt on it, quickly slipped the fastening into place. By feeling around, the youth found that there was no way out of the hallway except by going up the stairs or down into a cellar. He followed the former course and soon found himself on an upper landing, where a broad staircase led to a large and well-lighted front hall. He lost no time in descending the stairs, doing so almost silently, as the steps were heavily carpeted. But below the hallway was of polished wood, and his footsteps rang out clearly as he passed the door. This was locked and bolted, and the youth had considerable difficulty in opening it. "Hello, young man. What are you doing here?" suddenly demanded a sharp voice, and a side door opened from a store, and a heavy-set man rushed out. "I was trying to escape from the house on the next street," explained Bob. "Some men weren't treating me right." "That's fine enough to say, but I don't believe you. Just you wait until I call an officer." Bob was so taken aback that for the moment he did not know what to say. "An officer?" he gasped. "That's what I said. We have suffered from your kind several times, and now I intend to put a stop to it." The man spoke very decidedly, and as he faced Bob, he looked fiercely at the youth. "I am not a thief. You can search me if you wish." "Perhaps you didn't have the chance to get anything," sneered the heavy-set man, "but you are in the hall of my house, and that's enough." The man saw it, too, that the front door was locked, and placed the key in his pocket. Then he walked to the side door. "Jimmy," he called loudly. "What's up, Pop?" came in a boyish voice. "Go and get a policeman. I've caught one of those confounded sneak thieves at last." "Is that so, Pop? Good for you!" A freckle-faced boy with red hair came out into the hall and looked wonderingly at Bob. "So you're a sneak thief?" he said. "No, I am not," replied Bob. "Don't stand there all night, Jimmy, but do as I told you," cried the parent. Jimmy at once disappeared. The heavy-set man stood close to Bob, wearing upon his face a look of great importance. "You are making a great mistake, sir," said Bob. "I just came from Cabot's place, and all I did was attempt to pass through your hallway, and pick up anything you could find on the way, I suppose," was the cold reply. "No, sir." "Well, I won't waste words with you. The police will give your case all the attention it deserves." Bob heaved a sigh. If arrested, how could he prove his innocence? The fact that he had been in Cabot's at the time of the raid would not stand to his credit. Perhaps his story of being a prisoner would not be believed, especially if Casco, Barker, and the others escaped. Bob meditated a dash for liberty, but before he could put it into execution, the boy came back with a policeman. "Caught one of 'em, have you, Mr. Olney?" said the officer, and he took Bob in charge. "I have." In vain, Bob tried to explain matters. The policeman would not listen, and the youth was hurried off to the station house and thrust into a cell to await a hearing in the morning. He wondered what had been done at Cabot's place, and if any of his enemies had been captured. If not, this will give them a good chance to clear out, he said to himself bitterly.